Craig here for another episode of the Indie Media Report with my friend Kevin Zeese. Hey, Kevin.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So Kevin is the co-publisher of Popular Resistance, a website of daily movement news and resources. Co-publisher with Margaret Flowers. They have a brand new website which you should go check out. It's easier to navigate than the other one. I guess websites are something we have to constantly keep evolving. So we'll put links there. If you don't know Kevin and Margaret, they are well-known voices and advocates on the left for all kinds of politics and policy, actions, choices, thinking, and such. So maybe we just get right into Popular Resistance. What is the genesis and what's the mission of the project?
Well, the genesis really comes out of the Occupy era when we were doing Occupy encampments. And we had a website then, Occupy Washington, D.C., for the occupation. We were doing daily movement reporting then on what was going on around the country and around the world. And after the encampments ended about a year later, we met with a bunch of ex-occupiers and activists and just discussed what we needed for the movement. And one of the things we needed for the movement was a daily reporter or a media for the movement that would cover what's going on in the resistance movement. And I mean resistance bigger than Trump. It's not, this is the pre-Trump resistance. It was the broader challenges to our corporate duopoly. And so we decided to do that. We also wanted to, it's a site that's interesting because it's not just a media site, it's also an activist site. So on the website, you can see a handful of campaigns that we're spearheading, that we're involved in, helping to organize, dealing with trade, dealing with healthcare, dealing with net neutrality, and other issues, frack gas terminal, etc. And we get involved in those. We also get involved in other campaigns that we're not leading, but we also support other campaigns with our own activism and reporting. We have a calendar on the page where people can list their events, and so we can help to push movement events forward. So it's a mixture, a hybrid site, media and activism.
Yeah. Can you give us a few examples of some of the top level policy issues that you're working on now or using the site to shed light on or encourage people to get involved with?
Yeah, well, one of our views is that we have to unite various strands of various fronts of struggle into one large movement. And so something like net neutrality is an issue that really unites people. And we have a campaign for internet freedom that deals with equality on the net neutrality, and other issues that relate to the kind of internet we want to see. Mm-hmm. And that unites people because everyone needs an internet to communicate with each other, to organize events, to let each other know what they're doing. It's become a critical component of movement. You wouldn't have a Black Lives Matter movement without net neutrality and an internet that everyone has access to. There's been police brutality in Black communities for my whole life and for generations before that. It's become an issue now because people in those communities have a voice. And so net neutrality is very critical. Occupy would not have happened without the internet. We had about 50 to 100 people at Zuccotti Park when it started. The first weekend they did a march through New York. Some people were put behind orange mist police barriers, and one of the commanders came over and pepper sprayed them for no reason. That was caught on about 5 or 6 cameras. The police tried to claim they had to do it for whatever nonsense reason, but the camera showed it was false. Mm-hmm. And that just, within a week, there were encampments all over the country. And so having our own voice, not being blocked by the corporate media, whether it's TV or even written media, we're not going to get covered in the New York Times the same way we can cover ourselves. And so having our own voices, communities having their own voices is a critical step. So that's a movement of movement type issues. Type issue, trade is another one. We had that gigantic campaign against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And now we're urging trade for people and planet, because we see our trade agreements, they're called free trade, but they're really corporate trade. They're designed by and for the corporations, not for the people and planet. We want to see a different kind of trade, again, that unites everybody, mm-hmm. because trade affects everything. Healthcare is another one. These are all issues that bring people together because they impact everybody, and we really need to create a movement of movements that is effective at going after the big challenge. What's common to all these challenges is that it's corporate power versus people power. net neutrality? Are we going to privatize the internet, allow a handful of corporations to control where we go, what we can see, or are we going to let people have the choice of going wherever they want and putting up whatever they want, and letting people decide for themselves what's important? Same with healthcare. Is it going to be a privatized healthcare with for-profit hospitals, for-profit kidney centers, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies ripping us off? Or is it going to be a public good where people get the healthcare they need through a progressive tax structure and a single-payer system, and expanded and improved Medicare for all? So on issue after issue, that's the issue. It's the wealth versus the people. It's the corporate power versus the people, and we see that right now in this whole tax fight that's going on. So we pick campaigns that we think unite people and crystallize that issue, which is we think central to achieving economic and racial justice, environmental justice, and peace on the planet.
Yeah, so in a world of rational thinking, all that makes incredible sense, right?
That's
So,
right.
I started writing probably 2020, somewhere in the 90s about this. And from the place that we have so much information, with more information, of course, with the internet now, we have all this information at our disposal. But the main crisis is one of discernment. People don't know what to do with the information they're presented with.
Exactly.
There's so much misinformation, so much propaganda, so many ways, new ways, and we see now with what's going on, fake news, real news. I mean, it's all. In fact, I had a publication in the early '90s called The Real News. I didn't really know how prescient it was back then, but I wrote something this week about, and I know this is something that you don't cover at Popular Resistance, about what's going on with all these male predators and sexual abusers and all this, and the sort of reckoning that we're having nationally with this. And what's got me curious is that it's not an issue of fairness. People are saying, oh, if it was fair, then Trump would have to resign. This is not an issue of fairness. It's an issue of, in my view, an issue of hypocrisy. And when you present yourself with politically correct or behind identity politics, like the Democratic Party or liberalism has done for generations now, probably 2 generations, when we see men who are presenting themselves policy-wise and publicly as feminists and supporters of women's issues, but privately can't integrate that into their personal lives, I think that's the thing that's speaking to people, and why it seems much more damaging, potentially, to Democrats. Because I think after they pushed Al Franken off the plank, the thinking was, oh, now we can go after Trump, but realizing none of this stuff seems to stick on Trump.
Well, Trump was elected after these allegations came out, so I'm not sure why it should stick. But I think it's a little more. It's really. I think it's more basic than that. This whole sexual abuse, harassment by people in power, whether in power as a producer of a movie or in power as a senator. Bill Clinton survived these kinds of allegations. In fact, the National Organization of Women supported him during his sexual abuse allegations. He also was, in their view, a champion of women's rights. I say in their view because I would push further than he did. Is that hypocrisy? Yeah, it's hypocrisy, but I think it works on both parties. I mean, Trump doesn't claim to be an anti-women in politics. People can disagree on that. But so I don't see that as the issue. I see the issue as finally something is coming to fruition. Finally, an issue that we have been wrong on for generations. We've allowed to fester for generations, with women not having a voice to get their side of the story out. Finally, they're getting a voice, and so people are going to be reckoned with this new reality we're in. Of course, hypocrisy will make it worse. If you pretend to be for women's rights and then you're privately abusing women, that'll just be one more demerit in your situation. But the issue is, I think, one that's in transition right now. The country's trying to find its way through how we're going to adapt to this new era. How are we going to deal with allegations that are not yet proven against men? And what should be the reaction of those who have the power to do something about it, which often include men as well. So I think we're in a transitional period, and we'll see how this plays out. Maybe in a few years, a Franken type situation, wouldn't be one that would lead to immediate losing of his job or of his career. Maybe the people will see that's different from another situation that might be more abusive. But Franken, I think, was pretty abusive, to tell you the truth. I'm not saying he shouldn't have resigned. But we'll see. Down the road, we'll get this clarified. It's a new era, and we're in a transition, and so some mistakes are going to be made, some inconsistencies are going to occur. Hey, by the way, I just want to mention, I'm talking to you when you started that question. You started the tangent of people want to get involved, don't know what to do, movement stuff. How do movements work? I'm talking to you from what's going to become the popular Resistance Studio. It's actually in partial format at this point. And we did our first radio show for Clearing the Fog Radio last night, which will come out today in the studio. That's our first one. It's on net neutrality. And one of the first things we're going to be adding to our media is popular resistance schools. And the first schools we're going to be doing are on movements. How do movements grow? How do movements succeed? Discussion of strategy and tactics for movements. And that'll be a multi-part series on the web that people can watch and comment on, so we can have discussions about movements. We don't have all the answers, but we've done a lot of work on this, and I think we can present a lot of ideas to help people who are getting involved right now in resistance against the current era we're in. And we want to make sure, because what we see is in these kinds of situations is that they take time to build. So we're in an anti-Trump movement era now, which I think is a little bit of a mistake, because Trump is really a symptom of a much bigger problem. You know, his tax bill for the wealthy. The reality is both parties serve the wealthy. Both parties are funded by Wall Street. Both parties are funded by the war machine. Our problem is bigger than Trump. He's a symptom. So how do we move toward the real solutions? And I expect what would happen is what happened after George Bush. We got an Obama as president. He put out hope and change, raised people's expectations, and he dashed them as the reality of the Wall Street and war Democratic Party became his policies. I expect the same to happen again. Trump, Pence, at some point, whether it's in 2020 or 2024, will be defeated by another corporate Democrat pretending to be a progressive, and people's hopes will be dashed. And just like during Obama, we saw the Occupy movement, we saw the Black Lives Matter movement, we saw the student debt movement, we saw the fight for 15. All these fronts of struggle erupted. We'll see the same thing happen when the Democrats raise people's hopes and expectations. We want to make sure people who are getting active know what they can do to be effective when that occurs, because this boomerang against the current status quo will only go as far as the corporate Democrats allow. We want this boomerang to go further than they're comfortable. And so the more we define our issues now, the more we educate ourselves about how to move forward, the more effective we'll be when that boomerang happens.
You know, that's interesting. You talk about the certain boundaries of conversation, what they call in the media, I guess, the Overton window, right? What's acceptable in conversation and speech. And particularly in mainstream media, they've got a pretty narrow window. It's, you know, what's progressive in the mainstream media is classic liberalism, you know, and then whatever's right is pretty far right. So these boundaries are set up. And contrasting that, interesting, with this subject of fake news now. So people, you know, the what's presented. You know, when you see something advertising, we're telling you the real news. You better worry. Everybody from the New York Times, I don't know if you see, they take ads out on Facebook now. Tell them we're the ones you can trust. The Washington Post, all the big promoters of fake news, you know, are telling everybody how that they're the real news. But one story that came up, which is kind of close to you and I, because we were both Green Party voters last year, Jill Stein supporters, is the news today that she's a Russian agent. That's so. I mean, it made me laugh, but then it made me say, oh, wait a second. I see people on Facebook actually now, you know, repeating this. That, oh, look, there's that photograph, that one damning photograph that's been, you know, around with her and Putin and Flynn. So that it's like the same thinking. That must be, you know, you put Russian dressing on your sandwich, you know, you must have some Russian leanings, you know.
Well, you know, Russiagate is such a strange thing. I mean, it really has two purposes, I think. One is to give an excuse for why Clinton lost to terrible Trump. It wasn't the Democrats' fault, because Russia did it. The reality, of course, is Clinton was a terrible candidate. She had a long record. Unlike Obama, who had a very short record, he could put out images or rhetoric that allowed people to see what they wanted to see. With Clinton, you couldn't see what you want to see. You saw Hillary Clinton. She was supported every war that's been fought. She has been a friend of Wall Street. She's been on the board of Walmart. She's a big business, Wall Street and war candidate. So they need an excuse, and Russiagate was that excuse. It also is one that curtails Donald Trump. For whatever reason, the people in power in Washington D.C., the elites, the government that doesn't leave, whether it's intelligence or military, or whether it's many of the conservatives elected to the Congress who support a military-based foreign policy, they don't want peace with Russia. And Trump is talking about a kind of détente with Russia. I'm not sure what he means by that, but somehow getting along, that's his word, getting along with Russia. Maybe that means a Trump hotel in downtown, in Moscow. I don't know what it means. Maybe it means oil and gas drilling, where our companies go in and share the profits. I don't know what it means, but I wish he would define that. But they don't want the power structure doesn't want that, and RussiaGate prevents that kind of policy going forward, and so it makes it hard to have getting along with Russia as our policy. So I think RussiaGate's that. But every path they go down to try to prove RussiaGate ends up in a dead end. They can get Flynn and Manafort on not reporting something, and that kind of foolish felony, but they can't get him on actually working with Russia to elect Donald Trump. So we'll see. Maybe they will. I'm waiting for the evidence still. But so far, the dead end. They hit this Jill Stein path is another dead end. Stein was in Russia for a conference. She paid her own way. At the conference, she actually criticized Russia. And then, at that one meal, Putin came in, sat there for 10 minutes, and left. And that's the conspiracy photo. Everything's from that photo. We can imagine, oh, what a conspiracy. They're having a meal together. They must have been discussing, how they're going to elect Trump. And that's what Jill was there for, to elect Trump. But it's absurd. Yeah. She never got any money from Russia. And after the election, the recount, she criticized Russia for attempting to tamper with voting machines. Mm-hmm. And so she was a critic of Russia's role. So the whole thing is another dead-end path. It's an absurdity. Jill Stein is not an agent of Russia. She is someone who believes in the same things that we believe as far as economic and racial environmental justice. She's a doctor with a health background on environmental impacts on people's health. So she's not a Russian agent. It's another dead end, another absurdity, another headline to confuse people. More fake news coming from the real news.
Yeah. Talking about resistance. You and I have been communicating for a long time, and I think we both prefer the written word in how we communicate. I still write. Hopefully, people still read. I'm not so sure. But in this indie media landscape, what's become popular is what we're doing now, video, and also what's become popular is educating through memes. Which the video thing I acquiesce to. I understand it. I've used it now for the past couple of years. The meme thing though, I've been really resistant to because I find it to be a really unfortunate way to educate people. There was a meme the other day about saying Jodie Foster had done something about criticize the ruling class, and I said she didn't say that. I just looked at it and go, "There's no way she said that," And of course, I went and looked it up, and it was a hoax, But what concerns me about these memes, and I'm sure you see the memes that go around. There's a photo of somebody, and then there's some quote, but people aren't then forced to kind of do their own research, have their own experience with something, develop their own viewpoint, perspective, discernment with something. They just see these little flashes of something, and that's supposed to sort of suffice for some education. Do you have any feelings about what's going on with this particular area of independent media?
Well, this is something that's in media generally that's been going on for a long time. People don't have a big attention span. your videos are too long for me. You have an interview for 45 minutes. I turn it on for a few and I turn it off. Sorry to say that. But sitting down for 45 minutes to listen to something is just like, I don't have the time. And so even in the media, we've had this whole soundbite mentality, you know, get it all into a short soundbite. And the memes are really kind of a print extension of that. It's almost a print soundbite. And the problem with it is it can be so easily taken out of context and mislead. You can find lots of quotes from Obama or even Trump that sound great. Take it out of context, it can sound great. But then you put it in context and you realize, oh, he's putting up drone bases in Africa. Or, oh, he's got special operations going on in 149 countries, a record. That's Trump. Just broke the record for how many countries we have to have special ops working in. You can take quotes on his tax reform, middle class tax cut nonsense. Sounds great in the meme. Check the reality out. It's the opposite. And so it's a very easy tool to mislead with. And, so I think that's part of our job is to correct these misimpressions. So much of our job is really undermining the false images, false realities, misstatements being put out by the corporate media and the mass media. They have a much bigger platform than we do. They reach a lot more people. Although very interesting research came out in the last month that showed that independent media, when they work together, has a big influence on the direction of the country's thinking, on influencing how people see political issues. So it's a powerful force. And I think that's why we're seeing all these acts by Facebook and Google on algorithms. They're being pressured by the Congress and to control so-called fake news. In other words, news that disagrees with the corporate narrative. And we're seeing this whole net neutrality issue, where amazingly, it's not just net neutrality, by the way, this FCC action. It's the FCC saying we are not going to enforce any protections of consumers. They block a site. That's not our job. It's the Federal Trade Commission is going to do that. Federal Trade Commission can't issue a rule, but it can enforce. And if a internet service provider is transparent, says we're going to block the popular resistance website, the FTC can't do anything about it. So it's not just net neutrality, it's no protection. They're giving up their responsibility as enforcers of a decent internet, an internet that's free and equal for everybody, where we can put up our websites, not be blocked, people can visit them. It's a much bigger issue. So
yeah,
this meme thing is just the soundbite now put in print, and it's a very dangerous thing that can be easily misused. It's also a thing that can be very well used.
There's no doubt. Organization that I'm sure we both ascribe to, a cornucopia, a watchdog of the organic foods industry, and they're on Instagram using these memes constantly, and I trust them, and I'll be doing an interview with the executive director shortly, sort of about what's going on now with the watering down. I mean, the same thing that's happening now with the administration watering down on the protections of internet is happening now with the organic foods movement. All the USDA standards are being watered down, protections all the way down the line, and it's something I could be writing.
Memes can be very powerful. When we do protests, we expect the corporate media at most will give us an image, and so we work to make sure the image sends the message.
Yeah.
And the T-shirt, the banner, the sign that people make, whatever whatever it is, we want to make sure that image, that one image, tells our position.
Yeah.
And so that's a key part of setting up protests is essentially creating a meme.
Yeah.
Through a photograph. And so we work to make that happen, and it often does. I mean, we're amazed to see protests that we've done over years ago, and the image from that protest is still used today.
Yeah.
Because it makes the point.
Yeah, no, it's a double-edged sword. The meme thing is a double-edged sword, and
yes, it is.
and I might find myself acquiescing to using it too, just because it is effective. The thing that's important to stress now is supporting independent media projects. What you do, I'm gonna make public here that I don't believe you're independently wealthy, and I don't believe that you've got a inherited bankroll. to make popular resistance in this project happen. Uh, and because of that, besides going to the website, besides sharing the articles, people need to give support financially. We hear this now. How many times, I mean, a year from public radio stations and public media, and it's constant banging about we need money, we need money. Well, guess what? Independent media sites also need money. And we have to be okay to say that. So, can you talk a little bit about why you need money, what you do with the money, and how people can, we'll link to how people can give you money. But I mean, just
Well, we're right now in the process of our end of the year fundraising campaign, and we've been doing this just after Thanksgiving. We started a countdown to the new website. We a countdown to this new studio. We did our first radio show from the studio last night, and that'll come out today. We're counting down now to the school, and all this takes money and time and effort, and so we're in this phase right now of fundraising for the end of the year. We hope people will visit popularresistance.org and get involved. But so much of what we want people to do is so much more important than money. I mean, money is obviously important. We couldn't have, be building a studio without, thousands of dollars. And so it's very critical for that. But we really want people to be involved. For example, on our, we have a video page on YouTube. We get 1,000 likes. YouTube gives us additional benefits, additional tools. And so we're going to be pushing, we haven't started to push that yet, but we'll be pushing people to like our YouTube channel so we can expand that. Because of the work being done to stop our finding popular resistance in search engines and algorithms on Facebook and on Google, we're urging people to share our articles more. And so we've made it much easier on the new website to share a tweet or share it on Facebook or put it into social media in other ways. And so, money is very important. Money is essential. And so that's why we're fundraising. But activism is really the most important thing. Having more people involved, if I had to choose between money and people for the movement, I would pick people getting more involved. I'll spend a lot of time with someone who has the ability to reach a lot of people because we want to reach a lot of people to get them more involved. I really do believe that people power, it's always a constant battle of people power versus the power structure. This is one thing we'll talk about in the movement school, is that viewpoint, that analysis of people power versus the power structure. And I think it's key for us to develop our credibility because people don't know where to turn. And so we're trying to be very careful about being consistent in what we stand for and making sure what we publish on popular resistance, what we do at our campaigns is consistent with our overall mission of creating a movement to transform the society for economic, racial, environmental justice and peace. That's what we are. That's what Occupy was. That's what we are. And that's what we continue to focus on. And if people know, we don't hide our bias. So people come to our website, look at our articles, they know that's the perspective we're sharing. We're not going to try to pretend that we're an unbiased outlet. We're not going to be covering our articles about how great the Democratic Party is or Kamala Harris has our future or whatever. We're going to instead be focusing on really independent activity, challenging both parties in order to reach our goals. So people got to know what you stand for. And what's interesting with this attack on media, I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional on our part, maybe it's a reaction. The attack on media is making us actually emphasize the media aspect of our work even more. It becomes a political act now to do independent media. It becomes a political act to share articles. It becomes a political act when you realize that independent media is effective because there's lots of people involved. And if lots of people use their networks, whether it's Twitter, social media, websites of their own, discussion groups that they're involved with, wherever, if they use their social networks to push forward messages, we can be more powerful than cable TV. Cable TV has surprisingly few viewers, and we can overcome them if we work together in a coordinated way. So I really urge people not just to come to Popular Resistance. You can sign up for our daily digest, which is a free service. Every day is about 10 to 15 articles, a brief paragraph summary of each. You can then get the full article and share that if it's important to you. Sign up for the weekly newsletter, which is an analysis piece about the current issues we're dealing with we spent a good a day, Margaret Flowers and I, writing and preparing that, analyzing the situation we're in, what the lessons are. And so, for example, this last week was net neutrality. We didn't just focus on the immediate next steps, litigation, the Congressional Review Act. Those are the two immediate next steps to fight back on net neutrality. We focused on the longer term issue. What is the internet we want to see? How do we define the internet? Because the internet's become so central to functioning in the economy, in the culture, in politics, it's become the freedom of speech center for the 21st century. It's become a human right. You have to have it in order to survive as a human being. And so, what does that mean? And so, we hope to use that, like that newsletter as one of the goals was to start a discussion about the internet as human right. Mm-hmm. What is the internet we want to see? Because we think we need to put forward not just a fight on net neutrality, but a fight for a much broader vision of the kind of free speech center that we need for ourselves and for our future generations, so that the internet becomes a place that's a vibrant spot for people power to flourish.
Amen. Well, we're going to keep this right at 30 minutes so you don't get bored watching yourself. I will make sure that we link to your site, and then also people want to support what I do. There's a link to support what I do too at Now Age Press, because it all costs money. We'll get this posted, and we'll talk again soon, because it's always great to talk to you, Kevin.
I always appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Later.
Good talk.
Bye-bye.